Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy. You can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. Hi fans, welcome back. I have another guest with me today. Her name is Rebecca Cawood. She is another fellow registered dietitian nutritionist, just like me. Rebecca works at the Eating Disorder Center of Montana in Bozeman. She works with patients in outpatient, intensive outpatient, and partial hospitalization levels of eating disorder treatment. She completed a Bachelors of Science in Dietetics and Nutrition with a coordinated internship from Eastern Michigan University and is currently working towards becoming a certified eating disorder registered dietitian. Rebecca provides practical and positive eating solutions from a non-diet, weight-inclusive, and intuitive eating framework. With a personal history of disordered eating, she knows the physical, mental, emotional, and interpersonal damage that can be caused by diet culture and unrealistic body standards. She also knows that a life of recovery and food freedom is possible for everyone. Rebecca is passionate about creating a more equitable world where bodies of all sizes receive respect and compassionate care. She finds great joy and purpose in helping others regain body trust, honor internal cues, and live at peace with food and body. Rebecca, welcome to the Female Athlete Nutrition Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to getting to talk to you today.
Yeah, I think both of us being dietitians, I think we have so much to talk about. And just reading your bio just makes me feel good, like in my heart. The work that you do with your clients, I'm sure it wasn't an easy journey to get to where you are. And I'm sure it's not easy work that you do either, but just what a mission to, use the power of nutrition to create a world where people are comfortable with themselves and where all bodies are accepted. Yeah, let's just jump right to it, Rebecca. How long have you been working at the Eating Disorder Center in Montana?
I haven't been there very long, actually, just kind of under a year, but it is really kind of a breath of fresh air. It's where I really want to be, and I feel very grateful to be there and doing this work.
Yeah. So before that, were you working in the space of eating disorder recovery, or were you doing other things as a dietitian?
So most of my career as a dietitian has been in the clinical space. So I've worked quite a bit in inpatient and outpatient care. And so the last few years, especially in an outpatient setting, I did a lot of education, like continuing ed in eating disorders and learning about that, knowing that's kind of where I wanted to go. And also seeing more and more people coming into that setting with disordered eating, if not eating disorders, and kind of not knowing either that was what they were dealing with or not knowing where to go with that. So that's kind of where I built a lot of my experience and interest in sort of knowing that that's what I wanted to go into full time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you shared in your bio that you kind of had a history of, was it an eating disorder or disordered eating yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both. Yeah, for sure. And when I first decided to become a dietitian, that was, I'm sure, influenced by my eating disorder, because I was in the midst of a pretty raging eating disorder end of high school when I was figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. And at that time, nutrition was the primary thing on my brain. So it made sense to go into that. I also definitely prided myself at that time in being a weight loss, quote unquote, success story, and thought that I could educate people in what I had done. So yeah, that definitely hugely influenced my decision to become a dietitian. When I was in school, I actually remember being quite frustrated that nutrition science was so nuanced because I wanted black and white things to kind of teach my future patients and to kind of make myself feel safe with food. So there was a lot of kind of cognitive dissonance happening for me when I was in school, especially learning about eating disorders and seeing a lot of that showing up in my own life. So that's really when my recovery journey started, is in school to become a dietitian and doing my internship. And I went through recovery without a structured team of professionals, which, looking back and especially working in this field, I have a lot of compassion for myself for that. It is not the ideal way to go through recovery. And I think because of that, it took me a while. And even when I wasn't, maybe full blown eating disorder, there was a lot of just residual fear about my body, a lot of orthorexia, which, as a dietitian can be very normalized.
Yeah, totally.
So we're sort of seen as, the examples of healthy eating, and that can put a lot of pressure. So I would say when I first became a dietitian, that's kind of where I was, and definitely exercise played a huge role in kind of me feeling okay with myself and with my body. And then I would say pretty quickly when I started working with real life people and seeing that all of these things that I had learned about what I needed to teach people, or, weight loss, and just didn't resonate and didn't help. And it was just contributing to this like cycle of harm. Yeah. So I kind of sat with that for a while too, until I think I gained confidence to look at things from a different perspective, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Wow, thank you for sharing that. It's really interesting in our field, though. I'm not going to be so bold to say that, everybody with an eating disorder studies nutrition, nor that all dietitians have a past of that, because it's not true. But it's definitely a common thing. If in high school, all you're thinking about is food and body or sport, which is a huge focus for a lot of high schoolers, and then you're trying to decide, what do I study in college? A lot of people start studying nutrition out of what they think is an interest, and then what turns out to be an eating disorder, disordered eating. That's happened a lot. And it's interesting too, because and my story is a bit different. And for anybody who wants to listen to that, that was episode number 1 of the podcast. But it was a similar in regard to when I was trying to figure out what to study. My mom, and I love my mom, but she said, well, you're really good at dieting. Maybe you can teach other people how to do that. And that's kind of similar to you too. If you had that, air quote, weight loss success. And so how can I teach other people to do this? But the good thing that came out of this for both of us is we learned through studying and becoming a dietitian, wait, that's not right. And this isn't the right way wasn't right for ourselves and isn't right for people that we're going to guide in the future.
Right, right. And I felt a lot of shame about my past with an eating disorder working as a dietitian, and felt for a while that was something I needed to not talk about, that it somehow discredited me. And it's been kind of a very humbling journey and a very freeing journey to recognize my own humanity, and that, as a dietitian, there's me assuming or pretending that I'm some sort of expert or I've done it perfectly doesn't help me. It doesn't help the people I work with. And bringing my own humanity into that and allowing it to be a more compassionate provider has been a huge lesson for me. And I think there needs to be more conversations like this and more normalizing of the fact that a very large percentage of people that go into this field do have their own story.
Yeah. And not only the field of dietetics, but the health field, right? So as a sports dietitian who helps people overcome disordered eating, I work with female athletes. But in that, I also have clients. I've had dietitians as clients. I have nurses as clients. I have physicians as clients. I have coaches. I have personal trainers as clients, because I think it's in the health field, because there's that expectation. You kind of already mentioned it. There's this expectation as being the leader or the image of health that can create a lot of pressures, not only on body, but in our behaviors around food. And you mentioned, orthorexia or orthorexic tendencies. And I think I see that a lot in the health field, right? And I was just wondering, for our listeners, would you mind sharing kind of what that definition and scope of orthorexia is?
Yeah, absolutely. Orthorexia, the way I simply explain it, is a unhealthy obsession with healthy eating, or when healthy eating is kind of taken to unhealthy extremes. It can be very difficult to identify orthorexia in ourselves or, in others. It's so normalized in our world that, we eat clean, we eat perfectly, we don't have anything, quote unquote, unhealthy in our diet. Like that's really held up as a standard and as a goal. And you're right, especially with healthcare professionals, we feel that we need to be that example. So, orthorexia shows up with a lot of rigidity around healthy eating, where feeling very guilty for eating something quote unquote unhealthy, or enjoying foods that say come in a package or come from a fast food restaurant or anything like that. Being overly concerned with ingredients in foods, organic, clean foods, kind of a lot of focus there. So we see, people that struggle with orthorexia having a lot of stress and anxiety about eating anything that doesn't fit their definition of healthy. When we, in reality, know our bodies can handle a wide variety of food, and nutrition can come from all different types of food, whether or not they meet a certain criteria.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That was a great explanation. And that's why I think, like what you said, of having these conversations, being transparent that sure, you're a dietitian, Rebecca, but you're also human. And same with me, right? Like the goal isn't to have the perfect nutrition, and we have our imperfections, and to be able to talk about that, I'm sure, or I know for a fact, I don't know who your clients are, but I know for a fact that they appreciate your compassion and understanding, and having walked in their shoes, and quite frankly probably be absolutely be on the other side of it. It gives them hope, right? And I did a little bit of Instagram stalking before hopping on this podcast, and yeah, you actually on your Instagram account had such a beautiful post recently about like, dear past me, it's going to be okay. There's going to be a day we're going to eat a piece of cake without guilt. And that was just so beautiful and so inspiring.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's so much power in vulnerability and in being real to who we are. And I would say that's one thing that eating disorder recovery has given me. Recovery's given me so many things, but one thing is just the freedom to be who I am and to own the fact that I'm imperfect and don't get it right. And that's part of what makes me human. And, yeah, so kind of just owning all parts of my story and in all different aspects.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And so, as part of your story, as part of you being a dietitian now, you take this approach of being an anti-diet and health at every size dietitian. And, for people who are following me or listen to my podcast, I'm sure that I've spoken of these topics and I agree with them full-heartedly. But at the same time, I call myself a sports dietitian. I don't label myself as that per se. So I would love for you, as somebody who really, is like, this is what I am, this is what I do. What does it mean to be a health at every size dietitian?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for asking that question. Health at every size is a weight neutral approach to health. So it's based on the premise, and a lot of it was introduced in a book called Health at Every Size by Linda Bacon, and great read if anyone is looking into more of the science and research behind it. But based on the premise that you can't determine someone's health based on their body size or BMI or number on the scale. And so being a health at every size, or I might say HAES throughout this conversation, being a HAES dietitian means that the focus isn't put on changing somebody's weight. It's put on promoting what we call health promoting behaviors. So related to nutrition and nourishing oneself, related to activity, also things like sleep and stress management and understanding the other social determinants that affect our health. So much of approaches to health over the past years have been looking at weight first. And what we've seen is, first of all, that doesn't take into account a person's story or what they eat or how much they move, right? Because we exist in diverse bodies. And also putting that focus on weight manipulation can actually cause harm by contributing to fat phobia and weight stigma in healthcare, which often leads to people not going to the doctor or, being afraid to ask for help or feeling stigmatized in healthcare settings. And it also can contribute to disordered eating and eating disorders when that focus is put primarily on changing one's body size, right? So that's kind of in a short summary what HAES is. There is a really growing body of research to support it and why intentional weight loss, first of all, rarely works and then often does cause harm. So kind of looking at it from a different lens.
Yeah, it's really powerful because when you start to really dig into, how do I want to say this, where the focus on weight has led us. I've only been a dietitian for I don't know, a decade or so. But so this is way before my time, but there began a focus on nutrition maybe sometime in the 70s or 80s, and it kind of started with a focus on weight. And that honestly just carried and continued. And it's almost like the more that we focused on weight, the worse the nutritional state of America, I'll speak for America, has gotten. The more we focus on weight, the worse our state of nutrition and health even gets. So I think if I'm understanding you correctly in your definition of health at every size, it's just focusing on health. It's focused on health, no matter the body size or weight, and looking at it through a different lens. And I don't know, I just feel like, at this point, since we have been having, and I don't know that it's right or anything, but we've had governmental pushes of, fighting the obesity epidemic, and it doesn't work, right? Focusing on just weight and that. And I think you can correct me if I'm misquoting things or misinterpreting things at all, but I think it was sometime in the past decade too, where in the medical community, obesity was terminology wise considered a disease, which then treats it as just differently through the medical model, as opposed to treating somebody as a person and treating, what are our health concerns, not just attacking weight. And am I on the right track with kind of where the problems lie?
Yeah, I think you definitely are, Lindsay. There's been a lot of pathologizing of bodies, right? And even the BMI, which is so universally used for medical coding. I mean, the only way in, clinical settings, oftentimes an insurance will even cover nutrition therapy is if there's a BMI coding attached to it, which is horrific because the BMI was never, ever even designed to indicate health. And actually, and this was mind blowing for me when I learned this, people in the, so-called overweight category and even the lower end of the obese category often have better health outcomes than people in the defined healthy BMI, which is
Yes,
mind-blowing, right? Because,
it
yeah.
is mind-blowing. I've heard that too. The overweight category has better health outcomes.
Right. And so I think that just goes to show like that is such a faulty way of looking at health. So why do we keep perpetuating this system that does cause so much shame? I can't tell you how many people of all ages, from 10-year-olds to people in their 90s who feel incredible shame about their body size. And every time they see a healthcare provider are being told that their body is wrong. And that just makes me so incredibly sad. And it really doesn't tell us much at all about a person. So I think another aspect of health at every size is also honoring body autonomy. That if somebody does just want to focus on, getting food on their table and maybe getting some vegetables, but maybe most importantly, just feeding their children, that is okay and that is their right. And it's not my job to tell any person what their focus should be or how they should define health for themselves or what their body should look like.
Oh, I love the way you just said that there, because I think that's where I was trying to get at with like this medical model of where we're addressing, weight, when we're really supposed to be addressing what is the how do you define health for yourself and what is that priority, right? Having a healthy family might mean making sure that every person in the family has a meal that day. Having health for you could mean healthy relationships, right? And can you pursue healthy relationships when you're totally focused on body size? Maybe not. So there's health is not just, certainly not just weight, but it's also not just the physical. It's the physical outcomes, it's the mental outcomes, it's the social outcomes, financial health. Like there's so much that can go into defining that, right?
Right. And as much as you and I love food and nutrition and love talking about it and believe it makes a difference, when you look at all the determinants of health, it is a very small percentage of what defines health. I think like 5% is your diet and exercise, which impacts your health outcomes. And then there are all of these bigger things, the social determinants of health, where you live, where you grew up, your genetics, that have probably a much greater role. And unfortunately, there's not enough, work in creating equity and access for all of those things. We're working on it, but we're still so far away.
Yeah. 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 We can't solve all the world's problems
Right.
overnight.
I want to try. I
Yeah.
can't.
And we'll do whatever we
Right.
can. And I don't want to misquote you if it's not a true statistic, but that like 5% is like, is that like a approximate,
Yeah,
or is
I've
that?
definitely read that somewhere, but I don't know exactly where, so I don't know how reliable, but it's a really small percentage of kind of all of the things that impact our health.
Yeah. And I 100%, I 100% agree with your 5%. But I can agree with that sentiment of like, this is just one small role. And whether it's 5%, 10%, we're not quite sure, but and maybe I'll look that up afterwards for the show notes. But yeah, nutrition is just one small piece of the puzzle. And so I think that's where we can go so wrong, especially with people, for example, like athletes, my specialty, and I know there's athletes that come walking through your doors too, where athletes will do anything they can to make that, 1% difference in their performance. And it's almost like the go-to is nutrition. And look, sports dietitian here, I am super happy that athletes are thinking about their nutrition, because performance is heavily dependent on nutrition, right? If you don't fuel your body, you can't perform. If you're only eating spinach all day, you can't perform. If you're only eating ice cream all day, you can't perform. So nutrition plays a role in performance, but athletes like go to that to think like it's all about nutrition. And that's where the clean eating really starts. And yet when we even think about an athlete's performance, I would say the same sentiments of genetics, sleep, mental health, managing your schedule. There's so much else that goes into it. And athletes really do get stuck on nutrition as being like the one thing,
Right. Here in Bozeman, Montana, we live in kind of this interesting little bubble where there are so many elite athletes, or even if you're, an amateur athlete, like very elite standards for what that looks like. So we definitely see a lot of people coming into our doors at the Eating Disorder Center who are dealing with all of those things that you just mentioned. And this is where I think this weight neutral approach can be both very confusing and difficult for people to grab onto, but also can be extremely freeing because your body is not an equation, right? And for athletes, this can be a really difficult thing to grab onto because there's a lot of like biohacking in the sports world, and you just get like this equation right with your food and you're going to perform optimally. And probably every athlete who is listening to this or you've worked with knows that sometimes that's not the case, right? Like there's other parts of being human that can get in the way. So this weight neutral approach, I think, provides an opportunity for individuals to work with their body rather than working against it and saying, okay, really, how do we make sure you as an individual can fuel properly, can balance your activity with rest and with life, can do all of these behaviors, sleep, stress, to promote a well-rounded and healthy life while also performing in your sport? How can we focus on all of these things rather than putting the emphasis on whatever it takes to have this particular body or to have your weight in this particular range, which a lot of the athletes I work with, that's such a huge pressure that they have, an athlete's body, a runner's body, or whatever that is. And so their nutrition suffers, oftentimes their sport suffers because they're working so hard to fit that body ideal. It's a particular challenge for athletes, I think, to take this approach, but from what I've seen, it can be so effective and just open life up a little bit.
Yeah. And because when you think about it, if we don't, as athletes, if we don't take that approach and we're stuck with no, I have to be this body size, so I have to, eat this certain way or lose this weight or build this muscle in order to be this body type that I think is ideal for my sport. Well, what happens in the process is you break down, you get injured, you get fatigued, your mental health won't allow you to participate in the sport anymore. So it doesn't help you with your sport. So it's like, I know it's challenging for athletes to take a weight neutral approach, but I see it really, I don't know. I kind of see it as the only option because when we're doing it the other way, we can break ourselves down too quickly.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I think with any decision, there are going to be costs and benefits, right? So it may be at the cost of having your ideal body, and it may be grieving that. It may be feeling that people don't look at you and say, oh, she's a runner, right? Even though you can perform perfectly well as a runner. It may be kind of at the cost of that you really can promote good health or have a good relationship with food in your body, and maybe not feeling like you're taken seriously by coaches, or having to build this resiliency to exist however you want as an athlete, because the reality is you are allowed to exist in that world however you choose to exist. And the reality is there's a diversity of bodies that engage in a really high level in sport, but we often don't see that. So one of the things I'll just put out there is, in your social media feed, in the media you consume, making sure you're seeing a diverse range of bodies participating in the sport that you enjoy or in other sports. And they are out there. I can send you some to include in your show notes if you want, but just having people that don't look like that ideal, that are doing these amazing things. And oftentimes in my work, working with people with, eating disorders and disordered eating, often it comes to a point where I have to say, and I try to do this as gently as I can, but it hurts sometimes. If you need to depend on your eating disorder, if you need to depend on these disordered eating behaviors to stay in this body that you feel like you need to be in, or you feel pressured to be in, or that you believe is your athlete's body, then that is not the healthy body for you, right? And ultimately that is your choice, and you can choose the eating disorder and you can choose that. But yeah, you're right. That will probably lead to injury or your health, certainly your mental health suffering. But I think for each person, it's weighing those costs. So I have so much compassion for people in that space because it's going to feel like a loss either way.
Yeah, you just said things so beautifully. And as you were talking, another thing I was thinking though is like the loss of that ideal image or something that you thought you should have had. As you do let that go though, and you do allow yourself to continue to be an athlete who maybe is with the non-traditional body type, to me, I see that as somebody who's truly a role model because the reality is athletes do come in all different shapes and sizes. There isn't an ideal runner's image. There isn't an ideal gymnast image. There really isn't. Everybody's in all different shapes and sizes, but so many people quit the sport or drop out or get injured from the sport because of these pressures we're putting on ourselves. And if you can take this weight neutral approach, focus on performance, and be one of maybe few people who's holding space to say, I am a runner, I am a gymnast, I am a rower, even though maybe I don't look like it. You then give hope for every other person who's struggling with that, because the reality is every athlete feels this. Like every athlete, and so even athletes, I speak to many athletes, professional and clients of mine that maybe don't struggle with disordered eating or eating disorders, but they recognize the pressures that exist, right? They recognize the body image pressures. So it's like, I don't know if I'm talking in circles right now, but I just want to motivate people to allow themselves the opportunity to be an athlete in their sport without feeling the need to fit that mold of what it should look like, because then you can change what it should look like, I think is what I'm trying to get to.
Right. So it can be incredibly challenging, but it can also be, so freeing and refreshing, and also just opening a door, right? And at least for my own personal journey, seeing my own work of body acceptance, how it is its part in a larger scale, and especially on a social justice scale, has been really powerful for me, right? So if I really believe that all bodies deserve care and deserve to exist, then, how am I showing up for myself and accepting my own body? And most of the people I work with, can extend that compassion, empathy to others. And then when it comes to believing that for themselves, that can be so difficult. So just that work of self-compassion there. And even if it takes a while of just kind of sitting in this place, I use this term cognitive dissonance a lot, but when your thoughts and beliefs maybe don't match up. So you have this belief that, or that all bodies exist, but that should exist, and all bodies are, good bodies. But then you're also having this thought that my own body is not good. I think it's okay to sit with that tension for a while and wrestle with that while still taking care of yourself and not, maybe actively harming yourself with restrictive eating or, an eating disorder. So it's complicated, but yeah, I agree with you. Being able to show up in your body, in your sport, in the spaces you want to is amazing. It's tremendously freeing. And it's letting yourself be human too, which I think is really important for athletes. It's like, where's your humanity here, right? And how do you let yourself be fully human in this world?
Yeah, it's good stuff. And I appreciate too the allowing yourself to sit with that, right? That I come across this a lot with my clients actually. It's, I know what I should be doing. I know that my thoughts are wrong, or I would say this to somebody else. I would give this advice to somebody else, but I'm not doing it for myself, right? That's that cognitive dissonance you were describing. Yeah, and I think that's the value of working on yourself, going to a treatment center, working with a dietitian, working with a therapist, is applying it to yourself. We can talk these things all you want. For everybody listening, you can keep listening to my podcast. You can keep listening to these great conversations, but it's going to come down to, am I implementing it into my life? Give yourself time to reflect on it and then start making those steps towards, why aren't I implementing this in my life? How can I implement it into my life? And I think what I'm hearing from you too is you saying like that's an amazing thing about your journey is, continuing to implement all this within yourself too.
Yeah, right. And as much as, self-compassion is a big buzzword out there, I mean, I'm such a believer in it. And I think having compassion for, just personally myself, and, how did I get to this place? I didn't develop an eating disorder out of nowhere, right? Or what led me here, and how did that serve me at some point? How did it save me from something in my life? How did it give me something at that point? And now being able to see, well, it's no longer serving me and I don't need it, but I understand that it's hard, right? And just like extending that compassion and just being that caregiver to yourself, which can be such a challenge. And therapy is amazing. Being able to work through that, with a support system is amazing. And it takes time, right? And I think being able to show up for yourself is really also comes from understanding yourself and knowing yourself and not holding yourself to unrealistic standards and letting yourself make mistakes. And that's a huge part of the recovery process is, letting yourself be human, letting yourself not get it right all the time and learning from that and holding space for that.
I love that. So let's talk about this, about therapy and support systems. Where you work, you're the dietitian, but you have a whole team of people. And you mentioned earlier in your journey too, like you kind of did it alone. You didn't necessarily have a team to help you. So yeah, I don't know if you could expand on that and, why it is so important to have a team of people to help you through this.
Yeah, absolutely. So at our center, we have a team of dietitians, we have a team of therapists, and then we also have a music therapist and art therapist and people that work in kind of these different realms because eating disorders are so complex and there's this intersection between the food piece, but then also the mental health piece and the emotional health piece. And at our center, we work a lot with anxiety and recognizing the role that anxiety plays in eating disorders, which is huge. There's a huge connection there. So this idea of coming around and providing this holistic support is so important that, often people who feel they struggle with eating will say, okay, I need to go to a dietitian, right? Or maybe people will be going to therapy for something else and not feel able to access the food part. So really they're so connected and we have to be working on both. And I think that is where it was difficult for me going through it without a structured team because I was seeing a therapist, but I also was like, well, I'm studying nutrition. I can figure that piece out on my own and kind of not seeing how connected they were and how much the disorder was keeping me from really like understanding my body and feeling connected to my body and nourishing it. So I think that's why it took me a long time. I felt I had a certain amount of pride about the food piece. Yeah. So the team approach is so important.
It is. And, I don't have a specific number here, but I swear like half of my clients are either studying nutrition, have a minor in nutrition, like I mentioned before, come from a health field. All my clients are athletes. And so there's always this connection to food, and all of them have all of this knowledge with food. So much, this is going back to what we were talking about earlier, but it's the pride can get in the way sometimes of I should know this, I should know better, I should be able to figure this out on my own. But having a team is important. Having a coach is important. Somebody to guide you, somebody to show you your blind spots, somebody to veer you in a different direction when, you're taking yourself down a different path. So yeah, 100% support the concept of a team and addressing multiple things at one time, because as much as we call eating disorders an eating disorder, eating is hardly half the story, right? So there's so much else going on. I think you've addressed the therapy and the anxiety and depression that can go along, and trauma that often go hand in hand.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so important. And I think with another kind of piece maybe in all of this too, and I see this often with my clients who are athletes, is the idea of not feeling like sick enough to get help or that getting maybe the support that we need. I certainly felt that way. I think people who do have a certain knowledge about nutrition or are able to continue performing in their sport, even though it's such an internal battle, can often question whether or not they deserve to get help or if they're sick enough to get help. There's an awesome book called Sick Enough that addresses a lot of these things. But, I often say if there's any disconnect, if there's anything that just feels not right about your relationship with food or body, or if it is taking up a significant amount of your mental space, you want that to be different, you deserve to get help and you deserve to reach out, and you deserve to take up space in that area too.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to your comments about health at every size, right? If we deserve to pursue health at every size and we get to define what health means to us, right? Then I think also to question, am I sick enough, is also like, well, sick enough, like, how are you defining sickness? It's not just by your weight, or it's not just by your blood panels being thrown off. Like, how would you even define sick enough? If you're not living by your definition of healthy in all those regards, then that's reason alone to improvement, right?
Right. Yeah. And taking that mental health piece. If your mental health is suffering in order to, kind of maintain your physical health or whatever it is, like, yeah, that's enough to get support, which is navigating all of that. And the reality is body image and food, concerns with food are just so prevalent in our culture. When I find someone that seems like untouched by diet culture, I almost don't believe it. I'm like a skeptic about it because we're just swimming in this soup. So the need for being able to like orient and talk about these things and having a place to have these conversations is so important for most of us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so having a place to have these conversations. So I just want to highlight again for anybody local to Bozeman, Montana, that, you work at the Eating Disorder Center of Montana, where you can absolutely get these concerns addressed and you can get help and you can get support. And maybe you could even work directly with Rebecca.
Yeah, absolutely. And we work with people all over the state of Montana, virtually, out of state too, if you just feel like you need a supportive place.
Yeah. Amazing. And yeah, what is the best way, Rebecca, for people to connect with you or reach out with you?
Sure. So you can learn more about the Eating Disorder Center of Montana at edcmt.com. We also have an Instagram that we update fairly regularly. Lots of great information on there, even if you're not local and want to follow that. And that's Eating Disorder Center of MT. And then you can also follow me personally. I'm just on Instagram and I'm at Joy Fuel. So JOYFUEL Nutrition. And I put whatever I'm thinking about on there.
Yeah, and it's amazing stuff that you put on there.
Thank you.
I like I said before recording our little podcast, I was like, let me go to Joyfield Nutrition. And you had some really great, inspiring, educational, uplifting posts for lots of things. So, Rebecca, if you're willing to play along, I usually end each podcast episode with some fun rapid fire questions.
Sure.
You want to play? Okay. I always love asking dietitians this question too. If you could eat one food every single day for the rest of your life and never get sick of it, what would it be?
Oh, French fries, 100%.
So good. Do you have a specific place that's better?
Oh man. So a few years ago on my birthday, we did a French fry tour of Bozeman, which we just went to a bunch of places and sampled fries. So we have a really great place that has curry fries, which are amazing.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I'm not terribly picky, but I do love French fries.
That's awesome. Well, I'm hands down a McDonald's fries girl. Like I love McDonald's French fries, but I could pass them up really anywhere else. So, but I would, but McDonald's is like, yeah, I'll drool over those. Amazing. So we've talked a lot about athletes. I'm wondering what is your favorite sport to participate in yourself?
I love running. I'm kind of relearning my relationship with running as a new mom, but I think hiking. Hiking these mountains anytime of year. Love it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, in Montana, so beautiful. What about as to watch? What's your favorite spectator sport?
Ooh, that's a good question. Do you know what ski joring is?
I feel like I've heard of it. Can you
They
explain?
don't have it in Texas. It's ski racing, but being pulled by a horse. So it's this combination,
Oh my
and it is
goodness.
so fun to watch. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's insane. I actually haven't heard of it. It sounded familiar because, there's a few Winter Olympic sports that are, I guess I'll just say non-traditional. I hope that's not offending anybody when I say that, but just things that I don't see and hear of often, especially living in Texas currently. Winter sports not really a thing. So I thought it was one of those, but I don't think I've ever
Well, look it up.
watched
It
that.
is fun to watch.
Wow. Amazing. Okay, Rebecca. And then our last question is if there's a female athlete that really inspires you, and this could be somebody professional or recreational or someone in your life, who would that be and why?
So, kind of going back to what I was saying, but just following diverse people on social media, I started doing that a few years ago. And so I've learned a lot through these different people I've been following. Colleen Warner is someone I've recently just been really loving. She is a ballerina in kind of a non-traditional ballerina body, and she is also, I think, studying to be a therapist or a recent therapist grad. So she combines her pictures of dance with kind of therapy language, and she's just very inspirational.
Yeah, Colleen Warner. So improving diversity of bodies in sport. Amazing. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for having this conversation with me and all of our listeners. I think it's so important to continue to not only spread the work of what, places like the eating disorder center can do, but also just spreading this message of weight neutrality for all people, including athletes, and health at every size. I think these are really important discussions, and it was just really wonderful to have you guide us through this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
I really hope you enjoyed that episode, and thanks for listening. But before I let you go, I have free resources that you can have access to right away, right now, so that you can start fueling your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. First, I have your Red S recovery race. If you've ever wondered if you might be struggling with Red S, curious to learn more, or know you have Red S and are looking to recover fast, then you can head to www.riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS and download the Red S recovery race. See how you place and figure out the next steps to recovery. Plus, while there, I have a few other great resources for you, including 3 nutrition secrets that every elite athlete swears by, and access to our private Facebook community, Female Athlete Nutrition. So again, to gain access to all of this, head to riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS. That's /REDS. And you can gain access and get the help you need fast. Too many girls and women and female athletes struggle with nutrition, but you don't have to any longer. Become fierce, fit, and fueled. Links in the show notes, and I'll see you next time.